Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Programming in Python. In this episode, we are going to talk about data types in Python. So Python has several data types. First is numbers, you have strings, none, list, tuple, dictionary, and set. Let's start with numbers. So in numerical data type, we mainly have numbers which are basically of four types. One is integer. So integer could be like 0, 1, -1, etc. Then you have float. So your decimal numbers 0.23 or 4.0, etc. You also have complex. So complex format will be something like 3 plus 4j or 2 minus 2j. Okay. And then you also have the Boolean numbers. So for Boolean, you already know that it's true or false. Okay. Then we have string. So string is basically an ordered sequence of characters, which may be alphabets, digits, or special characters, including spaces. These are represented by a str class, and each character in a string can be accessed by its index. So let me give you an example. So I'm going to head over to my terminal, say Python, and then inside of this, I'll say name equals Imran. And then if you print name, you can see that that is a string or string data type. And then if you want to access a particular element, a particular character in this string, you can access it by its index. That's why it's ordered. So you can do square brackets. And if you look for, let's say I want the third character. So index starts from 0. So 0, 1, 2. So that I'm looking for number 2. So second index. So what do we get? R, correct? Change it to 0 and get I. Okay. So that's your strings. Then you have none. So none is actually a special data type in Python, which is frequently used to represent the absence of value. For example, money equals none. Okay. There you go. Doesn't have anything. All right. And then you have the list. So list is basically a sequence of items separated by a comma enclosed in square brackets. So let me show that to you. So let's say that I have some data. So I'll say data equals, and to create a list, you need to use square brackets, and inside of this, you can put the elements. So I can say 2, 3, 4. Now you must be wondering that what's the difference between a list and an array? How are they different from each other? So lists basically can have different data types. However, arrays have similar data type. In fact, the definition of an array is that it is a collection of data items stored in a contiguous memory location. So similar data types, but here in the list, you have different data types, right? So I can not only put numbers, I can put string as well, like so. I can put a different data type, let's say a constant, let's say the float value also, right? And then if I print data, there we go. Okay. Now lists are mutable. They can be altered even after creation. So I can go ahead and say the first element, make it equal to maybe a 10. So now if I print data, you can see that the index 1 actually is the second element. It's changed from 3 to 10. So they are mutable. You can change their values. Okay. Now each item can be accessed by its index, as I've shown you, and they can be duplicate items. So you can say, let's say data equals, in fact, I'll just copy this whole thing, paste it here, and I can again put 10, and that is completely fine for as long as they have different index, and they would be because they are an ordered list of the data. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this one has an index of 5. This has an index of 1. So they are at different positions, which is fine. The values can be repeated. Okay. Now, if you want to access specific elements in the list, you have different combinations available. So if you say :2, which means on whatever you put on the left hand side, let's say 1, so start from a 1 and give me the next one item. Okay, so let's hit it. Oops, I think it's data. So data 1, 2. So there you go. So it's starting from the index 1, which is here, and then giving me one item. So it'll give me the next item. Okay, so if I say data 1, 3, it's going to give me then 10 and 4. So 1 and 2. It won't go up until 3. It'll just give me before that. Okay. Now, if you omit one of this, let's say if you omit this, then that means that if you omit the left-hand side value of the column, then it's going to assume that as a 0 index, which means starting point. So what do you think this will give me? This will give me 2 and 10 and 4. There you go. Okay. If you omit the value after the colon, then it's going to print up until the end of the array. So you can see that it's given you 4 and then Imran 0.45, 10. Let's try something else. Say 1. So now you can see that it started from the 10th, which is the first element. Okay. If you omit both of them, right? So this will consider from the starting and ending. So if I hit it now, it'll print the complete array. All right. So I hope that's clear to you. Now we're going to go to the next item. Now we'll discuss tuple, which is the next data type. So we're done with the list. Let's start with tuple. So, well, tuple is very similar to the list. So it does contain the collection of items separated by a comma. But the difference is that in list, you were using square brackets. And in tuple, you're going to use round brackets. Okay. And there's one more difference, which I'll come to that. So, but let me just show it to you. So tuple data equals, instead of using square brackets, I'm going to use round brackets. Say 1, 2, 3. Okay, so tuple. I should have said tuple. I just said tube. That's fine. Tuple data. There we go. So the tuple items separated by comma are enclosed in parentheses. And the tuple is a read-only data structure. So they're immutable. You're going to change the value. So let me try to change its value. So let's say I want to change the first index element, which is the second element, to something else. Let's say 20. We'll see what happens. There you go. You can see tuple object does not support item assignment. You cannot change it. Even if you want to, you cannot change it. So they're immutable once they're defined. So we cannot modify the size and the value of the tuple items, right? Next one up is dictionary, which is this one. So dictionary, you can think of that as it holds data items in key value pairs, right? So let me give you an example. Let's say dictionary data. And for this, you're going to use the curly braces, and you can put key value pairs. So I can say name and then colon and then value. So name could be Imran, comma, and then I can say age 30, and then so on and so forth. You can give it something else also. So let me just show that to you. I think we made a mistake. This needs to be in the colon. So as you can see, that the first, which is the key, needs to be a string. The value can be anything. It could be an integer or a float. It could be or a string as well, right? But the left-hand side value, the left-hand side, which is the key, needs to be a string. And that's why we got an error over here, because we didn't put that as a string. So now let's try it. So that works. Say dict data. There we go. All right. And if you want to access any of these elements, so let's say you want to access the value of this particular key, you can just say dict data, and then I can say name in quotes and see what we get, Imran, right? You want to access the age. There you go. Okay. Can we change it? Let's try it. So let's change it to 31. And let's say dict data age. There we go. It's changed now. Okay. Print the whole dictionary. There we go. You can see that age has changed now, which is excellent. Okay, so next one up is set. So set is actually a data structure containing unordered, unique, and unindexed elements. Okay, so we use set in case if the order does not matter. And the items inside of set, unlike tuple or unlike list, they are unique. So if you remember in the previous example, we discussed that the items in the list can repeat themselves at different positions. But in set, items cannot repeat. It has to be unique, okay? And they are unindexed. What does that mean is, so unordered, we discussed, it can be in any order, unique, and then unindexed. Unindexed means that you cannot access it, its value with the help of its key, right? If you want to print it, you can still print it using a for loop, but you cannot access it by its key or by its index, right? Not key, index, okay? So how do you define it? Well, there are two ways of defining it. First is you can use curly braces, 1s, that's a string, again a number, or you can also define it using a set function, and you can say 1s7 curly braces, sorry, square brackets, that's it. Print A, okay, that's your A. Print B, that's your B, right? Okay, so now since we know the basic data types, let's talk about some of the operations on the different data types. So let's start with the list operations. So let's say we have two lists, A equals 1, 2, 3, and then B equals 4, 5, and 6. Okay, if you want to concatenate the elements of this array, you can just say A plus B, and you can see that, let me just zoom it in, you can see that it has concatenated, just like strings, it has concatenated the elements of the first array with the elements of the second array, right? So which is great. You can also repeat the items of the array using the multiplication sign or asterisk. So let me give you that example. So let's say we have an array called C and we put a string called pass inside of it. If you say C into 3, what do you think would happen? Well, it's going to again print the same array, but it's going to repeat pass 3 times. There we go. Okay. You can also use the double equal to operator compared to lists. So we can check if list A equals list B. So you've already initialized that earlier. Is that true? I don't think it is. So let's try it. False. It is not. Okay. If you want to check if a particular element is inside of the array, you can check that as well using the in. So let's print the array1. Now, if I want to check if 3 is inside of this array, sorry, inside of the list, what do? We go ahead and say 3 in A. So what do you think we'll get? Should get true. There we go. Let's try 5 in A. No, false, because 5 is not present in that list. Okay. And then if you want to check if the item is not in the list, we can use not in. So we'll say, let's say 4 not in A. True. 4 is not in A. Okay. So now let's talk about some of the operations that we can perform on the string. Okay. So we'll say Python. Let's say we have a variable called greet that has a value of how are you, so it is a string. What we can do is if we use list and then we pass the string inside of it, it's going to convert that into a list. So you can use the list function to convert a string into a list. So if you click on that, you can see that it's converted that into a list of characters, right, including the spaces. Now you can also concatenate a string to a list. So how do we do that? Let's say we store this inside of a variable. call it str to list equals, and then we concatenate it, or we create another variable, we call it friend equals Imran. I'm going to put one space here, and let's add these two, this plus this, and see what happens. So str to list plus friend, what do you think will happen? So as you can see, you get a type error saying you cannot concatenate list to a string. It can only be concatenation for list to a list. So if we were to say, if we convert friend into a list also, because this, see, this is already a list, correct? This is already a list because we use the list method to convert that into a list, right? Now, if we convert friend, which is this one, which is currently a string, also in a list, then we can concatenate it. So we can say list friend, and now hit it. Now you can see that it's concatenated. How are you, Imran? And of course, including the space. Okay, so I hope you get the idea. Now let's see how we can loop through a list. So I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to open a new one. And over here, I'm going to create a list, data list equals, say, Imran to Sayed 4, etc. Okay, now I'm going to say, I'm going to use a for loop. So the loops available you can loop with. So I'm going to say for, and then I'll say items in, and the name of the list. So it will be data list. Okay. And then colon, hit enter. Notice what it's done. It's created a tab space over here. So tab is important. Okay, so spacing is important in Python, which we will discuss in future videos. But yeah, just consider that there has to be a space. There has to be a tab over here. So notice that unlike PHP or C, we are not using curly braces, right? We're using just colon and then tab, and then it will understand that. Okay, so we'll say print, and then we'll say items and see what happens. There we go. In fact, I should have called this item, right? So it's printed those elements, okay, which is great. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the extend function. Okay. So extend takes the list as an argument and appends all of the elements. So let's say we call it nList equals 25, 35, 30. Okay. And then we create another list, and we call it numList equals 1 and 2. So there are 2 items in this list, and the other one has 3 items. So I can say nList dot extend num. Okay. So now if I say nList, notice that it has extended the previous list. So it's added it to both. Now there's another method called pop. So pop is used to delete the elements from a list if the index of the element is known. So let's say this nList contains these 5 elements, and I know the index of 35 is 1. If I want to delete it, I can say nList and dot pop, and then I want to remove the first element, which is 35. So I'll say 1. So I'll give the index of 1 and hit it. So it returns the number that has been removed. So this pop function returns the number that's been removed. And if I now print the nList, you can see that particular element has been removed. Just in case, if we do not want it to return the element that's been removed, we can use del for that. So if I say del numList, and then inside of that, if I give it the index of, let's say, 1 again. So I'm expecting that 30 to be removed. Let's try that. So now you can see that if I print the numList again, so let's say nList, and I'll say del nList, and I want to remove the first item, hit it. Now you can see that it's not returning anything. And if I press it, you can see that item is gone. Now, if you want to remove more than one item from the list, you can also use the slice index that we learned earlier. So I can say del nlist, and then I can, let's say I want to start from the first index and I want to remove one element. So I can do this. And now if I say nlist, you can see that the first two items have been removed. So I'll start from the index 0 and remove two items. Okay. Right. Now there will be scenarios where you will not know the element's index. You just know the value of that element. So how do we remove that element? So let's try that. I'm going to again say nlist equals, since lists are mutable, I'll again reassign the value. So now our nlist contains these values. And if I want to remove one from it, and let's say I don't know the index, I don't know where that one is. So I can use the remove method. So I'll say nlist.remove, and I'll put this value of 1. I want to remove this one. So let's see, hit it. Now I can say nlist, so that element has been removed. I want to remove another one. Let's say I want to remove 30. Okay, so I'll put 30 here, and that has been removed. So that's the difference between the remove and pop. So for pop, or in fact even numList, for pop and numList, you need to know the index. You need to pass the index. But for remove, you can just directly pass the element value, and it's going to remove that for you. So there are other methods also, like append, count, insert, right? You have extend, you have index, remove, sort, reverse. So all of these methods are available. You can check them out. There are also built-in functions that are used in the list. For instance, you have len function if you want to know the length of the list, how many items are there in the list. So I can say len, and then I can say nlist. You can see there are 2 items because the list currently has 2 items. Then there is sum as well. So I'll say nlist. If you want to know the sum of the items in the list, then you can say sum, and then nlist. And now you can see that it's returned the sum, which is 25 plus 2. Then you have any. So any function returns true if any of the Boolean values in the list is true. Okay, so say any and say nlist. You can see that it returns true. You have all, so all function returns true if all Boolean values. You can also create list inside of list. So I can say my list equals square brackets. So first list 1, 2, 3, and then next list 3, 4, 5. So you can have multiple lists. So these are called nested lists. Okay, if you say my list now, you can see that these lists are printed. Okay, so it's time to check our progress now. Let's go through these questions. Now, which one do you think is not a core data type? Well, you remember we discussed data types, which were list, dictionary, and tuples. Class is not the core data type, is user-defined data type. And then what data type is the object below? So if you remember, we discussed that list will have a square bracket, right? And it's a collection of items with different data type. So you can see that they are a collection of items with different data type, separated by comma, wrapped inside of square brackets. So this is a list basically. Now, what is the data type of type 10? So what do you think this will print? Well, this is an integer. So let's try that. Type, so it's an integer, okay? If you convert one data type to another, and it is called type conversion, typecasting, or both of the above. Please write your answer in the comment box. Next question is, in which data type indexing is not valid? So we know that in dictionary, indexing is not valid because in list, we can definitely access the element by its index. In string, where there are multiple characters, we can access it by index, but in dictionary, we can't. We have keys inside, or we have key value pair. So if you want to access it, we have to provide the name of the key as a string, right? So that's why the answer is this one. In which of the following data type duplicate items are not allowed? So if you remember from a previous discussion, it is the set where the duplicate data is not allowed. So in case if the order does not matter and we just want to have a list of the items which are unique, which are there shouldn't be any duplicates, then it will be set. Okay, so answer is set. Next one up is empty list in Python is made by this, both the above, or none of the above. So please put the answer in the comment box. If you try to access the item outside of the list, then what type of error it might give? Let's try it out. Let's say L equals 1, 2, 3. So clearly there are only 3 items, which means 0, 1, 0, 1, 2. So there are 3 indexes here. If I try to access L, fourth one, it says list indexed out of range. So what do we get? Out of range. Okay, so that's the answer. Next one up is L equals 1, 2, 3, 4. Then L minus 2 is what? So if you use minus 2, negative 2, then it's going to print the index in the reverse order. So let's try it out. So I'm going to copy this, paste it here. So if I say this one, and then I put minus 2, it's going to go reverse. So I'll say 3. So item is 3. Okay. Okay, let's do another one. What will be the output of the below Python code? So let's say we put this list here, and then we're going to say list 1 remove 2. So what's going to happen? Well, it's going to remove the item 2. Okay. And of course it'll look, because there are multiple elements that are of the same value, it's going to pick up the first one that it finds. Okay. So it's going to find this one. So it's going to remove that. So ideally I'm expecting everything except this number from here. We go, let's say list 1. The answer is 1, 3, 5, 4. So 2 is removed, and 6 and 2. Okay. And then if you print the sum of the list, so if you remember from the previous discussion, that sum basically adds all the elements in the array, all the numbers in the array. So if I do print sum list 1, it's going to give me 21, because 1, 3 is 4, 4 plus 5, 9, 9, 4, 13, 13, 6, 19, and 2, 21.